that looks good. All right, guys, I'm over here on the St. Lawrence River down on the Indian Reservation. I've got William Clute with me. He's one of the local guides here. He's a buddy of mine. I've known Will for quite a while. So he'll be doing the filming for me, and hopefully we'll keep it rather civilized. We'll attempt to. I'm here to talk to you guys about differences of Ethernet and the NMEA bus and what type of data you get from each one and how they kind of work. And then when I get back off the water, go back home, I'll show you how to hook all this stuff up. Okay. But right now we're just going to talk about how the data, what gets shared and things like that. So, all right. So what we're going to do, we're going to switch over and look at this right unit here. And if I look at the right unit, if I want to look and see what's running on Ethernet, you can pull that back a little bit. There you go. All right. I just simply come over here. If I go to the About box, this is the quickest way I've found to find what is running on your Ethernet, and also it shows some of the stuff coming from NMEA. Like, for example, your temperature probe is NMEA. The console right, console left, the bow units, those are all NMEA bus. Okay, I don't have the active target turned on right now. We'll turn it on in a minute. But the other devices here, the point ones, the trolling motor, the temperature sensors, all of those are NMEA bus. And what the NMEA bus really is to you is the NMEA bus essentially sends data out on the network. Okay, it's individual points of data. Like you punch a waypoint, it'll send the waypoint data out. Very, very limited amount of data that goes out there. You want to get temperature, you go and it sends temperature out. It basically sends it in a bunch of sentences. You don't have to worry about how it works under the covers, but pretty much it's just small amounts of data. Okay. Ethernet, on the other hand, I use it, or Lowrance uses it as well, basically. They're sharing the maps, so spin over here. If I wanted to, say, put this Navionics map onto this right unit here, okay, what I have to do is come over here and change my map source. When I change the map source, what it does is it shares that mapping data from this left unit to the right unit, okay? And that is just a significant amount of data. If I, say, want to have my active target showing up on my left unit here, then that's coming across on Ethernet too, a lot of data. Same thing with the S3100 module. That's all that side scan data. That's too much data to ship on the NMEA 2000 bus, okay? So let's look a little bit at the NMEA bus itself. Okay, I can show you how you find out what's on there. So we'll come over here. You come over to settings. Okay, scroll up to network. Okay, if you look at the device list, touch that. Okay, and you'll see I got a list here. I got an EP80R, which is a temperature sensor. That's the one that's in my live well that I put in as a secondary. There's a Ghost trolling motor, which is the Ghost on here. Each unit will have a group. So there'll be an MFD version, there'll be a navigator, a pilot controller, a sonar, and GPS, okay? And what the sonar does, spits off of those 4 units, it actually gives you depth data, depth and temperature. It doesn't give you anything else, just depth and temperature, okay? So I've got more point ones. Okay, so I got a couple point ones on my boat. And let me show you a little bit about these point ones. This is an Evinrude powered boat, okay? Evinrude requires a 0.1 or a GPS type antenna. That antenna was essentially not a full 0.1 when it was shipped. It was what I call a neutered version, okay? And what I mean by the neutered version, if I come over here, if I come over to this 0.1, okay? And the way you do when you touch device, okay, it brings up this screen. It'll tell you the instance, the name, things like that. I label this as rear 0.1, okay? I label my devices so I can easily know what they are, okay? Now, if we look at the data on this 0.1, you'll go through here, you will not see an orientation or heading sensor, okay? It just doesn't have it. So if we go back, say, and look at the 0.1 that I have up on my bow, which is this 0.1 up here, and we look at the data, now you'll see I have a heading sensor right there, okay? This is the heading sensor. And that's what's missing out of that other 0.1 antenna. So you need to kind of know if you have a 0.1 on the boat, is it a neutered version or a full version? If you buy it, from Lowrance, it'll be a full version. If you happen to have a boat that was or was an Evinrude G2 boat, it would have the neutered version. So that we look at. So you can see it gives us all sorts of information. If you go back and say, let's look at the ghost, okay? The ghost is on the network, okay? And you can see that it's just basically comes up as the device name. There's not a lot of data that's showing on this. It shows your propeller rate, which is the speed you have the little knob on, and it shows the temperature probe, which is the temperature coming off the nose cone itself. So those, even though that looks like the only data available, that's the only public data. So for example, the Ghost 360 runs, there's a lot of private sentences that are used to run the motor back and forth that you don't see, that you don't have access to. And that's okay. So now, the one thing about this NMEA bus is that right now I have the motor turned off. And if we look through this list, I don't see my motor anywhere, okay? And that's normal, perfectly normal, okay? So if I power the boat on, okay, pushing the start button, you'll notice that list just changed, okay? And now I see my Evinrude popped up, okay? That's because it had to be energized to see it on the network. And that's the way these NMEA devices work, okay? So now if I punch the data, you can see there's a lot of data stuff. The motor's not running, but you can see, for example, I've got 2 gallons of oil left. My battery voltage is 12.7, things like that. Now, if I take and crank the motor like that, now we're starting to get live data. The RPM is showing it, right around 500, which is the proper level. I've got the oil level stuff. You can see my battery current's running at about 24 amps, which is good. But that's pretty much all the engine data. But the engine data only shows up when you're running the data. It's only valid when you're running the motor, okay? At least with the Evinrude controller, it only shows up when the engine is energized or basically powered up. Now the vessel view link, actually it's the link, not the mobile version, but the link version, okay? That will show up on the network all the time, but it won't necessarily show the engine data because the engine, again, needs to be turned on to provide the data, okay? So that's a little bit about how this is done. The other thing is that on my boat, I have 2 temperature probes, okay? I've got the one that's in the hull, which is coming from the factory, which is the one down here, okay? It's called in hull, okay? And you can see the data coming off of that. It's 82 degrees. The water's pretty warm. We're really shallow right now. So that's the one that's coming off the hull. But in my boat, what I did is I added a second one. And what I did is that when I did that, I changed the instance from 0 to 1 because it uses the 0 instance as the default value, okay? So I changed this to instance number 1, so it would come in secondary. So when I want to have that version, it'll come up, or actually when I want to have that device, it'll come up on the network and I can find it. But what I did to make it simpler for me is I changed that to live well, okay? And that way I know that temperature probe is my live well. Okay. The Ranger 600 series, the Pro series, they have all that stuff built into the ride system. And actually the ride system is pre-programmed with this type of data. The bass boats generally don't have it. And my live well is showing 109 degrees, which is a little warm. I don't think I want to keep fish in there. Now, if I put water in there, it'll drop. You can watch it drop. So what I do during the tournaments, I watch my water temperature, and if it's too hot, based on the current temperature of the water, what I'll do then is I'll add in some ice to it, okay? So, all right. So that in a nutshell is pretty much what you're seeing. Let me shut the motor back down, okay? And as we come back with the motor, eventually these things will die. This piece here is actually my gas tank control. There's the EMM. I also have the icon in here, which is right there. That's the icon touch, and that's the touchpad on there, okay? Some of these devices don't give you any data that's public, okay, but they're on the network. So, and that's okay. So let's go back and let's look at the other way to find stuff on the network, okay? If we go to data sources, and I have done the videos on this, and you can see it where it pops up. We can see, like, we've got the heading on the from vessel, and that's on the 0.1 on the bow. This one's not configured to run that because when that trolling motor is stowed, it's basically, the calibration is off because of magnetic interference from the motor head itself, okay? So that's that we're not using. But if we're looking at sonar, what sonar is coming across the network, okay? You can see I've got sonar coming on multiple different devices. I've got it coming on this one here, which is my 3100 module, okay? I've got the console right, I got the bow lower, and then I got the in-hull, okay? So essentially I have 4 different sources of that. If I turn the active target on, I'll also see another data source. All those sonar data is coming from the network itself, okay? So for example, if we come back over here and we want to see, okay, this, if I go to my side scan screen, there's a side scan page right here. This is the side scan, and it's coming off of this unit. That's a 3-in-1. If I take this one and switch the source, all right, if we look at the source, right, it says this unit. Now I have the fish reveal and I have the 3-in-1, okay? So I want to look at the 3-in-1, and that's coming off the 3100 module. That's coming, that data, all this data right now is coming across the Ethernet, okay? So if my Ethernet's down, you won't see this data. And that's perfectly fine. So, in fact, let's pop it into full screen there. It's a little easier to see that. So you can see the differences. The fish reveal is showing me these little green lines, which is the fish reveal or fish marks. There's probably a bunch of little bait fish swimming around in this area. I don't see anything out from us. To the right, we've got a shoreline. Pan over to the shore. So you can see the shoreline there, and that's basically what this side imaging is showing. On the left-hand side, it drops off. You can see the drop lines right there. So that's that data, again, Ethernet data. Okay. So if you're having trouble with getting your data, you look at the data sources, see if it shows up. If it doesn't show up, check your network, and the way to check the network is go into the system about box, you know, really quick, and I'll give you a list of what's on your Ethernet. I've been dealing with one of the subscribers. I don't want to create a report, but I've been dealing with one of the subscribers. He's up in Michigan. He got some of the older live units that were made right after COVID hit. You know, during COVID, there was a major chip shortage, and they switched up the Ethernet chips in the units. And what happened is that those chips got confused as far as handling multi-ports, okay? And on all these units all these units have on the back, there's 2 Ethernet ports on the back, okay? You can see them down here, those yellow covers down there, okay? And what would happen is that depending on how it's configured, you may get a unit that would not receive waypoints from other units. It may not receive the map properly, so the fix around that is to put a network hub in, okay? And I'll try to patch in a picture of the network hub down below. So anyway, that's just a kind of a quick about what's on your network, what's on your boat. If you're having trouble, you know, it's basically one network or another. Again, remember, NMEA, single points of data. You know, very limited, very, very limited amount of data. Ethernet, whatever you want. I mean, your phones, you know, on your 5G networks or whatever, it's under the covers running an Ethernet style connection, okay? And it's running more than likely a TCP type connection, which is a network protocol. So, and that's what these boats are running, all right? So I'm also going to be doing a video on upgrading this boat from a NEP 2 to a NEP 3, which is the gigabit stuff. And I'll show you a little bit more about the hardware, okay? All right, I mentioned this a little earlier in the video here, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about waypoints and waypoint sharing. I know a lot of you guys do use waypoints. I mean, I've got a ton of waypoints for the different lakes and water bodies that I'm on. And I want to make sure that all my units get shared the same data, okay? So let's look at a couple things. One, you can share waypoints on both NMEA 2000 and also Ethernet. Okay, long before the Ethernet got working on all the devices, I was using the NMEA 2000 bus to share my waypoints. One disadvantage of that is that it really didn't. It basically only shipped that waypoint. When I punched out a waypoint on a unit like this one, okay. So I'd hit the waypoint button, create a new waypoint. It would then get shipped along the NMEA bus, the NMEA 2000 bus, to the other units. The problem is those units had to be powered on, okay. If those units were not powered on at the time, that waypoint was never sent to all the units, okay. So if you say you had one of them turned on, maybe one on standby. I'm not sure if they transmit on standby. But if you had one on, one powered off, and then the other one's, your console, the one you're working with, say the console of the bow, punch the waypoint, one arm wouldn't pick it up, the other would pick it up. Now what you have is now you got possibly two different sets of waypoints in your machines. One unit would have all the waypoints but the new one. The other one would have all the waypoints including the new one. But the numbering system may have gotten off. And that was one problem I always had. I would create new waypoints. Waypoint numbers were getting messed up. I would have to pull them off the units, correlate everything, put them into a single file, fix the waypoint numbers, and then put them back. I've done that for a lot of people where they have like 6 number 001 waypoints, and then another 6 or 7 002s, and on and on and on like that. So it'd be very time consuming to correlate your data, your waypoint database back to something that's usable to you on the water, okay? Now, when Ethernet came along, okay, Lowrance added the capability of sharing the waypoint database, okay? That's a full set of waypoints in one machine. So when you power up a machine, okay, it becomes the master in your network that owns the waypoints, okay? And then it goes through a procedure with all the other available units on the network to correlate and basically coordinate the database, waypoint database within the machines, okay? The nice thing about that is that now you know that if I punch a waypoint on this machine, the waypoint set on the other units in my network were always going to be the same. And that's kind of nice to do. So what you could do then, for example, the way I work my waypoints, I have them like I have a set of waypoints for Champlain, I have them for Ontario, I have them for North Carolina, I have them for Kentucky Lake. So every time I go to those water bodies, I will delete the old waypoints off after I've, of course, backed them up on whatever lake I was on, okay? Then I'll load the waypoints that I have saved on my SD cards back onto the unit. And the way I do that is I go through the waypoints, I delete all the waypoints, I do a purge occasionally just to clean up the waypoint, the internal data. And then when I put the new unit or the new waypoints into that unit, as soon as I have the other ones powered up, they all now have the new data, okay? So basically, you turn everybody on, you delete the old stuff, you load up the new ones, and boom, they're all populated. And that's a very, very handy thing. So that's a major, major difference between waypoint sharing on Ethernet and NMEA 2000. Okay, so just be aware of that difference. That's why when I put boats together, I put both NMEA 2000 and I put Ethernet in there. The NMEA 2000 shares devices. Ethernet shares maps, sonar, waypoints, things like that. So that's very, very important. All right, let's look at some hardware that's needed for both Ethernet and the NMEA 2000 buses. If you look on the back of your Lowrance units, okay, you'll see a lot of units will have 2 network Ethernet cables or connections. These are the yellow ones. And the little black one is the NMEA 2000 one. Power, and then you got the 2 transducers, okay? So we're just gonna deal with these over here, okay? So Ethernet is fairly simple. You take an Ethernet cable, really simple, plug it in that and latch it together, and then hook it to another unit. That works great if you have, a smaller network. Typically what I do is that when I have a larger boat, like for example, 4 units plus plus an active target, or an S3100 module or a structure scan 3D or whatever, I will have what's called a network hub, which is a NEP2. If you watch my video I did on the upcoming, the gigabit Ethernet stuff, you'll see that there's NEP3 out. I'll have a video on that soon once I get back up there and finish the job. But what you do is you plug your Ethernet cables from your unit directly into the hub, okay? And so don't go through another unit. Basically, if you hook a unit, say if I have a second unit or I have an active target module, I hook, say, the active target module here, and then I hook this one to another unit. That's essentially what's called a daisy chain. And you're going to be limited a little bit on performance on that, only because the way the network's doing. Smaller networks, you don't usually see an impact. But when you have a larger boat with, say, 4, 5, or even 6, 7 units, and a couple active target modules, and maybe a structure scan 3100 module or 5100, you'll see some negative degradation on the network speed. So that's why you use hubs. There are 2 different types of Ethernet cables. This is an older Ethernet cable. This is where they use a little bit different wire type, and I had a lot of these fail. This is the old gray one. So if you have those in your boat, if you start having issues, just replace the cable with the black cable. I've had a couple guys try to use aftermarket cables. I just stick strictly with the Lowrance ones. So hooking up Ethernet is fairly simple. Hardware is fairly simple. You basically have a network hub and you have network cables. Very, very simple. You have to plan ahead. For example, when I did that Elite FS boat and I added an active target module, I had to add the NEP2 to it so that I could hook up 3 devices, because Elite FSs have 1 network port, okay? And I needed 3. I needed 2 network ports on 1 unit, and then I needed another one, okay? And the idea was to connect the 2 units together and connect the active target into the network. So the hub is the way to go. All right, so that's in a nutshell about how you connect Ethernet. It's straightforward. Now, the NMEA 2000 is a little different. It's what's called a balanced network, okay? And I've got a very, very simple Ethernet NMEA 2000 right here. See if I can get, let me slide this over so I get a little bit longer. Okay, what I have, this is a very simple NMEA 2000 bus, okay? I have these T nodes, okay? This is a NMEA T connector. All devices, including power, get connected off the bottom of this T. This piece back here is what's called your backbone. Okay, so the backbone has a terminating resistor on both ends. So this is electrically what's called a balanced network, a balanced resistance network, okay? So in your boat, you should have at one end of your network a terminator resistor, and at the other end of the network, you should also have a terminator resistor. And it should all be coming off the top of the T. So this is considered the T portion, right? So on this NMEA bus I have built up, this is on my test bench. This line right here is my power node. The NMEA bus needs to be powered up. The Ethernet, it's powered up by the internal circuitry in the units themselves. But the NMEA 2000 uses a separate power node, okay? This situation, let's see, there's the power node. I have what's called a drop cable. And this drop cable here would simply plug into the unit, okay? So in order to connect my unit to the network, it becomes fairly simple. You just plug it in here. What I found, the easiest way I found to connect those in is once you get it lined up here, as you start, let's see if I can do it. Okay. When I start putting it in, I twist it a little bit, and I'll push the pins in a little bit, push it. And what that does is it makes it a lot easier to go into the connector here, okay? And that way you sure that as it goes in, all the pins are fitting. So this unit is now connected to the NMEA bus. And this situation, in my little test network here, I have a 0.1 connected. This is the 0.1 antenna, okay? It's connected, again, the same thing into this lower bottom of the T. So that's your NMEA connection for a 0.1. Your Ghost trolling motor, there's a NMEA cable coming off the trolling motor that plugs into the bottom of the T. So for example, this is set up to say handle easily 2 units. If I wanted to simply say add another unit, okay, I've got an option. I can take this T apart, okay? Okay, I can either take the resistor or take it there. And what I can then do is I can then take a NMEA cable and run it from here to, say, my bow. And then on the bow, I connect this back into that NMEA cable I just ran. Okay, and now I have a terminated network with an extension. There are limitations on the number of nodes you can have on NMEA buses. There's a power requirement that you've got to have. There's also limits on the drop cable length. 15 feet is kind of max you want to do. Typically what I do is on my boat, I'll either have a 2-foot or 6-foot dropping to the units, and I'll use whatever drop cable I need for the, like a 0.1. Usually that's near the NMEA connections as well. So that in a nutshell is what the NMEA bus is and how you connect it up. I have seen a lot of issues where somebody will take and connect a device coming on the side here, and they'll put the terminator here, or they'll put 2 power nodes into the network. None of those work, okay? Or if you forget to simply power up your NMEA bus, that doesn't work very well either. It will work for some devices, but not all devices. So just follow the basic rules. Everything comes off the bottom. Everything comes off the bottom from a T. The T is a form of your backbone. The end of the network has terminating resistors, and then you've got to have it everywhere. Okay, you've got to have one power node. There are power isolator nodes you can get, so you can put it in between here and isolate this set of power from this set of power if you need to. Most boats that I've been dealing with, bass boats and then the smaller saltwaters, which are under 30 foot, generally can run one NMEA network without having to split power on it. Okay, so that's your NMEA 2000. Okay, a lot of times I'll just say NMEA bus. It's NMEA 2000, okay? There is a NMEA 186, and that's on your power cord. And I know you guys have seen that, and everybody asks, what are those extra wires for? It's for the NMEA 186, okay? What that is those are older devices. That's the older iteration of this NMEA 2000 bus, all right? And I appreciate you guys watching it. Hopefully you learned a little bit, and it wasn't too boring. And so, yeah, it looks like we might have a little bit of clouds coming in, so we're going to have to wrap this up. All right, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Bye. And where's my phone?